everybody, welcome back to my channel DP211 with Emma, and if you're new here I would love for you to hang out with me just a little bit longer, hit subscribe button, ring that notification bell, and every time I upload a video to the tube of views you will be notified on your phone, your iPad, your tablet, your watch, possibly your computer, and maybe your TV if you know how to work out one. And if you're turning, welcome back, it's so good to see you. I do miss you when you're not here. Welcome back everybody to Friday night story time, where we read a story every week. Well, we read part of a book every week, and this week we are finishing Before the Coffee Gets Cold by Toshikazu Kawaguchi. And I have to look because I never remember how to pronounce it. I did say at the start my Japanese pronunciation is not the best. So we're going to carry on with the final story called Mother and Child. When it appears in haiku, higurashi cicada is a term denoting the season, associated with autumn. The mention of the higurashi therefore evokes an image of it shrilling at the end of summer. In reality, this insect's cry can be heard from the beginning of summer. Somehow though, while the shrills of the abura cicada and the min-min cicada evoke the images of blazing sun, midsummer and scorching days, the songs of the higurashi evokes images of the evening and the late summer. When the sun begins to set and the dusk gathers, the kana 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 of the higurashi evokes a melancholic mood, and one gets the urge to hurry home. In the city, the shrill of the higurashi is seldom heard. This is because, unlike the abura cicada and the min-min cicada, the higurashi like shaded places such as the canopy of a forest or the cypress groves away from the sun, but live near our cafe was a single higurashi cicada. When the sun started to set, a continual kana 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 could be heard coming from somewhere, shrilling fleetingly and weakly. This was sometimes audible in the cafe, though as the cafe was at basement level, you had to strain your ears to hear it. It was that faint. It was one such August evening outside the abura cicada. Outside, the abura cicada was loudly shrilling G, G, G. The weather office had reported that this day had become the hottest day of the year. In the cafe, it was cool despite the lack of air conditioning. Kazu was reading an email that Harai had sent to Yugi's phone. I have been back at Takakura for 2 weeks now. There are so many new things to learn. Every day I am nearly reduced to tears. It's so tough. Oh, she does have it tough. Listen to Kazu was Kotaki and Nagia, as neither Kazu nor Kai had a phone. It was Nagia's phone that received all emails sent to the cafe. Kazu didn't have a phone because she was not very good at maintaining personal relationships, and saw phones as a means of communication as nothing more than a nuisance. Kai didn't have a phone because she cancelled it when she got married. One phone is enough for a married couple, she said. In contrast, Harai had 3 phones, each for a particular purpose. One for customers, for private, and for family. On her family phone, she had saved only her family home number and her sister Kumi's number. Also, for one from the cafe knew it. Though no one from the cafe knew it, my apologies. Now she had added 2 extra contacts in her phone reserved for family, the cafe and the gear's mobile. Kazu continued to read out the email. Things are still a bit awkward with my parents, but I feel returning home was for the best. I just think that if Kumi's death had led to unhappiness for both me and my parents, then that unhappiness would have been her only legacy. So that's why I intend to lead a life that creates a more wonderful legacy for Kumi's life. I guess you never thought I could be so serious. So anyway, I'm happy and well. If you get a chance, please come and visit. Although it's already come and gone this year, I highly recommend the Tanabata Festival. Please send my regards to everyone. Echo Harai. Nagia, listened at the entrance to the kitchen with his arms folded, narrowed his eyes even more than usual. He was probably smiling. It was obviously difficult to know. It was always difficult to know when he was smiling. Oh, isn't that wonderful? Kotaki said, smiling happily. She must have been on a break between shifts as she was wearing her nurse's uniform. Hey, check out the photo, Kazu said, showing Kotaki the photo attached to the email. Kotaki took the phone in her hand so that she could get a good look. Wow, she already looks the part, for sure, she said with hidden surprise. Doesn't she? Kazu agreed, smiling. In the photo, Harai was standing in front of the inn. With her hair in a bun, she was wearing a pink kimono, indicating her status as the owner of the Takakura. She looks happy. She does. Her eye was smiling like she didn't have a care in the world. She had written that the things were still awkward between her and her parents, but standing next to her were her father Yasu and mother Mikiko. And Kumai too, muttered Nagir, peering at the photo from behind. Kumai is no doubt happy as well. Yes, I'm sure she is, Taki said, looking at the photo. Kazu, standing beside her, also gave her a small nod. She no longer had the cool demeanour she had while conducting the ritual for returning to the past. Her face was gentle and kind. By the way, Taki said as she turned the phone to Kazu. She turned and looked over dubiously to where the woman in the dress was sitting. What's she doing over there? It was not the woman in the dress she was looking at, but Fumiko Kuwakawa, who was sitting on the chair opposite her. Fumiko had travelled back to the past in the cafe that spring. Normally the epitome of a working woman, today must have been her day off, as she was dressed casually in a black t-shirt and 3/4 length sleeves with white leggings. On her feet were cord sandals. Fumiko had showed no interest in her eyes' email. Instead, she was staring at the face of the woman in the dress. Just what she wanted was a mystery. Kazu had no idea either. I wonder too, was all that Kazu could reply. Since spring, Fumiko had occasionally visited the cafe. When she did, she sat there opposite the woman in the dress. Suddenly, Fumiko looked at Kazu. Excuse me, she said. Yes? There is something that's bothering me. What is it? This whole thing, where you get transported through time. Could you visit the future too? The future? Yes, the future. Hearing Fumiko's question, Kotaki's curiosity was piqued. Yes, I'd be interested to know that too. I know, right? Fumiko agreed. Going back to the past or going to the future are both about being able to travel through time. And I thought maybe it's possible, Fumiko continued. Kotaki nodded in agreement. So is it possible? Fumiko asked with eyes filled with expectation and curiosity. Yeah, of course you can go to the future, Kazu bluntly replied. Really? Fumiko asked, then in her excitement she accidentally bumped the table, spilling the woman in the dress's coffee. The woman twisted eyebrows and in a great panic Fumiko wiped the spilled coffee with a napkin. She didn't want to get cursed. Wow, Kotaki exclaimed. Kazu looked in both women's responses, but no one goes, she added coolly. What? Fumiko asked, taken aback. Why on earth wouldn't they? She demanded, drawing her closer to Kazu. Surely she wasn't the only person to whom the idea of travel to the future appealed. That's what she meant to say. Kotaki also looked as though she wanted to know why no one went. Her eyes widened and she looked intently at Kazu. Kazu looked at Nagir and then back at Fumiko. Well, okay. If you want to go to the future, how many years forward do you want to go? Despite the question, apparently having come from nowhere, it seemed that Fumiko had already considered this. 3 years from now, Fumiko answered immediately, as if she had been waiting to be asked. Her face turned a little red. You want to meet your boyfriend? Kazu inquired, apparently unmoved. Well, so what if I do? She stuck out her jaw as if to defend herself, but her face grew redder. At that point, Nagir interrupted. No need to be embarrassed about it. I'm nothing of the sort, she retorted. But Nagir had touched a nerve, and both he and Kotaki were looking at each other, grinning. Kazu was not in a teasing mood. She was looking at Fumiko with her usual cool expression. Fumiko picked up the seriousness. That's not possible? She asked in a small voice. No, it's possible. It's not that it's not possible, Kazu continued in a flat monotone. But how can you know that in 3 years he will visit the cafe? Fumiko didn't appear to understand the point of the question. Don't you see? Kazu asked Fumiko, as if cross-examining her. Oh, Fumiko said, firmly getting it. Even if she travelled forward in time by 3 years, how can she possibly be sure that Goro would be in the cafe? That's the sticking point. What's happened in the past has happened. You can target that moment and go back there. But the future's completely unknown, Taki said, clapping her hands as if playing on a quiz show. Sure, you can travel to the day you wish to go, but there is no way of knowing if the person you want to meet is going to be there. Judging by Kazu's nonplussed expression, there must have been lots of other people who had pondered the same thing. So unless you're counting on a miracle, if you decide on a time in the future and travel to it, for just that short time before the coffee cools, the chances of meeting the person you actually want to meet are very slim, Nagir added, as if he explained this sort of thing all the time. He finished by looking at Fumiko with his narrow eyes asking, you get what I'm saying? So going would just be a waste of time, Fumiko Miko muttered with acceptance. Exactly, I see. Considering how seemingly superficial her motive was, Miko was probably should have been more embarrassed, but she was so impressed with the airtight nature of the cafe's rules that it did not cross her mind to question Kazu's response further. She didn't say anything, but she thought to herself, when you return to the past, you cannot change your present. Going to the future is simply a waste of time. How convenient. I can see why that magazine article described the cafe's time travel as meaningless. But she wasn't going to avoid embarrassment so easily. Nagia further narrowed his eyes inquisitively. What did you want to do? Make sure you were married? He teased. Nothing of the sort. Ha! Knew it. No, I told you it's not that. Ah! The more she denied it, the deeper the hole Miko seemed to be digging herself into. But fortunately for her, she wouldn't have been able to travel to the future anyway. There was one more annoying rule preventing this from occurring. A person who has sat on the chair to travel through time once cannot do it a second time. Each person receives only a single chance. But I think it would be easier not to tell Fumiko that, Kazu thought, as she observed Fumiko chatting happily. This was not out of consideration for Fumiko, rather because she would demand a reasonable explanation for such a rule. I can't be bothered dealing with that, Kazu thought simply. Hello, welcome! It was Fusagi, who was wearing a navy polo shirt, beige brown trousers and seta sandals. A bag hung from his shoulder. It was the hottest day of the year. In his hand he held not a handkerchief but a small white towel, which he was using to wipe his sweat. Fusagi! Nagia called his name rather than chanting the customary greeting of hello, welcome. Fusagi first looked a bit confused, but then he gave a small nod in reply and went to sit down in his usual seat, at the table closest to the entrance. Kotake, with her hands behind her back, strolled up close to him. Hello, darling, she said with a smile. She no longer called him Fusagi like she had used to. I'm sorry, do I know you? I'm your wife, my love. Wife? My wife? Yes. This is a joke, right? No, I am really your wife. Without hesitation, she slipped into the seat facing him. Not sure how to react as unknown women behave in such a familiar manner, he looked troubled. I would prefer it if you didn't take the liberty of sitting here. Oh, it's perfectly fine that I sit here. I'm your wife. It's not fine with me. I don't know you. Well, then you'll have to get to know me. Let's start now. What on earth do you mean? Well, I guess it's a marriage proposal? While he was gaping at this woman in front of him, she sat there smiling. Visibly distressed, he sought the help of Kazu, who had come to serve him a glass of water. Please could you do something about this woman? If you were a stranger, take a quick glance, you might see a couple in a good mood. But if you looked harder at Fusagi, you would see the face of a man in distress. He looks a bit upset, Kazu said, offering her support with a smile. Is he? Oh well. Maybe it's best to leave it at that for today, Nagia said, behind the counter, offering a lifeboat. Similar conversations have played out between the couple on several occasions. Some days, when Kotake told Fusagi that she was his wife, he would refuse to believe it, but oddly on other days it was different. There would be times when he would say, "Oh, really?" and accept it. Just 2 days earlier she had sat opposite him and they had what seemed to be an enjoyable conversation. During such conversations they mainly talked about the memories of travel. Fusagi enjoyed telling her about he who had travelled here or where he had visited there. She would look at him with a smile and add, "I went there too," and both of them would become engrossed in the conversation. She had come to enjoy this kind of casual exchange. I guess so. I'll pick up the conversation when we get home, she said, and then went back to sitting at the counter, resigned to leaving it that for now. But you seem happy with things, Nagia observed. Oh, I suppose. Despite the cool temperature of the cafe, Fusagi continued to wipe the sweat forming in the beads of his face. Coffee, please, he ordered as he removed the travel magazine from the shoulder bag and spread it out on the table. Okay, Kazu said with a smile and disappeared into the kitchen. Fumiko once again began to stare at the woman in the dress. Kotake was leaning forward with her cheeks resting on her hands and looking at Fusagi, who was looking down at the magazine, oblivious to the fact that he was being watched. Nagia, while watching these two, began to grind coffee using a retro-looking coffee mill. The woman in the dress, as always, continued to read her novel. As the aroma of freshly ground coffee filled the cafe, Kai appeared from the back room. The sight of her made Nagia stop. Good grief, Kotake said when she saw Kai's complexion. She looked very pale, almost bluish, and she was walking as if she might faint. Are you okay? Nagia asked brusquely. clearly horrified as the blood seems to have drained from his face too. "Oh dear, sis, I think I'd better rest today," Kazuo called out from the kitchen. "No, I'm okay, I'm fine," Kai said, trying her hardest to look better, but she couldn't hide how unwell she was. "You don't look like you're feeling too good today," Kataki said, standing up from her counter seat while assessing Kai's condition. "You should be resting, don't you think?" But Kai shook her head. "No, I'm fine, really," she insisted, making a peace sign with her fingers. It was plain to see that she wasn't. Kai was born with a weak heart. Ordered by doctors not to take part in intense physical activity, she was never able to take part in things like sports days when she was at school. Nevertheless, she was naturally sociable and free-spirited, an expert at enjoying life. This was one of Kai's talents for living happily, as Harai would say. If I am unable to do vigorous exercise, that's okay. I won't do vigorous exercise. That's how she thought. Rather than just sitting out the races and sports days, she would get one of the boys to push her in a wheelchair. Of course, they had never had a chance of winning, but they gave it their all and always seemed to be bitterly disappointed when they lost. In dance class, she would make slow movements, in complete contrast to the swinging and shaking that others were doing. Doing things differently from everyone else would normally antagonise those, making sure no one went against the grain. But no one ever thought that way with Kai. She was always everyone's friend. She had that sort of effect on people. Irrespective of her strength of will or character, Kai's heart often seemed to deteriorate. Although never for very long, Kai was often pulled out of school and hospitalised for treatment. It was in hospital, in fact, that she met Nagare. She was 17 years old and in her second year of senior high school. While in hospital, she was confined to bed, so she got her enjoyment from conversations she had with her visitors and the nurses who came into her room. She also enjoyed staring out at the outside world. She also enjoyed staring out at the outside world beyond her window. One day, while looking out the window, she saw in the hospital garden a man who was fully wrapped in bandages from head to toe. She couldn't take her eyes off him. Not only was he entirely wrapped in bandages, he was also so much bigger than everyone else. When a schoolgirl walked in front of him, she appeared tiny by comparison. It was perhaps rude to do so, but Kai called him the Mummy Man, and she watched him all day without getting bored. A nurse told her that the Mummy Man had been hospitalised after a traffic accident. He had been crossing the road at an intersection when there was a minor collision between a car and a truck just before his eyes. He luckily escaped the collision, but the side of the truck dragged him about 20 metres and threw him into a shop window. The actual car crash was minor and the people in the car weren't injured. The truck, however, had driven up onto the curb and toppled over. There was no other bystanders hurt. If the same thing had happened to someone of normal build, it could have meant sudden death, but a large man soon picked himself up as if nothing had happened. Of course that was far from true, and he was a bloody mess, bleeding everywhere, but despite his condition he stumbled to the overturned truck and called out, "You okay?" Petrol was leaking from the truck. The driver was unconscious. The big man pulled the driver from the truck and while casually carrying him over his shoulder called out to one of the onlookers gathered at the scene, "Call an ambulance!" When the ambulance came, they took the big man too. He had terrible bleeding from all the cuts and grazes, but he hadn't broken any bones. After hearing the Mummy Man's background story, Kai grew even more intrigued. It wasn't long before this intrigue had grown into a full-blown crush. He became her first love. One day, on an impulse, she went to meet him. When she stood before him, he was even larger than she had imagined. It was like standing in front of a wall. "I think you're the man I want to marry," she declared, without reservations or embarrassment. She said it clearly and directly to the Mummy Man, the first word she had ever spoken to him. The Mummy Man looked down at her and for a while said nothing. Then he offered a pragmatic yet not entirely negative reply. "You'll be working in a cafe if you do." The 3 years of dating started then, and finally when Kai was 20 and Nagare was 23, they signed the registry books and became husband and wife. Kai went behind the counter and began drying dishes, putting them away as she always did. The siphon could be heard begin to gurgle from the kitchen. Kataki continued to look at Kai with concern, but Kazuo slipped into the kitchen and Nagare once again started grinding coffee beans with the mill. For some reason, unbeknownst to everyone, the woman in the dress was continuing to stare at Kai. "Oh!" Kataki exclaimed just before the sound of breaking glass could be heard. The glass had fallen from Kai's hand. "Sis, are you okay?" Normally so calm and collected under any circumstances, Kazuo came rushing out in a panic. "I'm sorry," Kai said, beginning to pick up the broken glass. "Leave it, sis, I'll do it," Kazuo said while propping up Kai, who was beginning to buckle at the knees. Nagia said nothing and watched. It was the first time Kataki had seen Kai in such a serious condition. Being a nurse, she dealt with ill people all the time, but seeing her friend looking so unwell shook her to the point of the blood draining from her face. Kai, darling, she muttered. Are you okay? Asked Fumiko. It naturally caught Fusagi's attention as well, and he lifted his head. I'm sorry. I think Kai should go to the hospital, Kataki advised. No, I'll be okay, really. But I really think. Kai shook her head stubbornly. Her chest was heaving as she breathed. Her condition seemed worse than she thought. Nagia said nothing. He just kept looking somberly at his wife. Kai took a deep breath. I think I'd better lie down, she said, and staggered towards the back room. She had gathered from Nagia's expression that he was seriously concerned about her condition. Kazuo, look after the cafe, please, Nagia said as he followed her. Yeah, sure, Kazuo replied, standing still as if her mind was elsewhere. Coffee, please. Oh, sorry. Usagi obviously had read the mood and had been biting his tongue, waiting to make his request. His prompt for coffee brought Kazuo back from her daze. She had been so caught up with Kai, she still hadn't served Usagi his coffee. The day ended with his heavy mood still lingering. Since becoming pregnant, whenever she was free, Kai would talk to her baby. At 4 weeks, it was a bit early to be calling it a baby, but that didn't deter her. In the morning, she would start with "Good morning," and rather than calling Nagia Papa, she would set out to explain the events of the day. She found these imaginary conversations with her baby the highlight of any day. Can you see? It's your Papa. My father? Yes, he's huge. Yes, but he doesn't only have a huge body, he has a huge heart as well. He's a very kind, loving Papa. That's good, I can't wait. Papa and Mama can't wait to see you either, my love. So went these conversations in which, of course, Kai played both roles. But the sad reality was that Kai's condition was worsening as her pregnancy progressed. At 5 weeks, a sac has formed inside the uterus, and inside there is the embryo, measuring 1 or 2 millimeters. This is when the baby's heartbeat becomes detectable. From this point, organs begin to form quickly. Eyes, ears, and mouth develop. The stomach, intestines, lungs, pancreas, cerebral nerves, and aorta are formed. The hands and feet begin to protrude. All this early fetal development is taking a toll on Kai's physical condition. She was also getting hot flushes, yet felt like she had a fever. The hormones that her body was producing in order to create the placenta were making her feel lethargic and subject to strong waves of sudden drowsiness. The pregnancy affected her mood, which is swung from one extreme to another. She would have periods of anxiety, short bursts of anger, and then feel depressed. There were times where some things seemed to taste different from normal. Despite this, however, she never once complained. Conditioned by her regular spells in hospital since childhood, she never complained about her physical ailments. But over the course of the last couple of days, her condition had rapidly grown worse. 2 days earlier, Nagia had taken advantage of a brief moment alone with her primary doctor to demand more information. The doctor had confided in him. Frankly, your wife's heart may be unable to withstand childbirth. Morning sickness will begin from the 6th week. If she gets a bad bout of morning sickness, she'll need to be hospitalised. If she chooses to have the baby, she has to realise that the possibility of both she and her child will survive is very low. Even if she and her baby survive the birth, it will take a tremendous toll on her body. She must understand it will definitely reduce her lifespan. He added, normally terminations are performed between 6 and 12 weeks. In your wife's case, should she choose to end the pregnancy, it should be done as early as possible. After returning home, Nagia confronted Kai, telling him everything that had been said. After he had finished, Kai simply nodded. I know, was all she said. After closing the cafe, Nagia sat alone at the counter. The room was lit only by the wall lamps. On the counter, several small paper cranes were lined up, made by Nagia from a folded paper napkin. The only sound that could be heard inside the cafe was the ticking of the wall clocks. The only things moving were Nagia's hands. Although the bell rang out, Nagia showed no reaction. He just placed the paper crane he had finished folding on the counter with the rest. Kotaki walked into the cafe. She had dropped by on her way home from work because she was worried about Kai. Nagia, who was staring at the paper cranes on the counter, nodded his head slightly. Kotaki stood at the cafe's entrance. How's Kai doing? She asked. She had found out that she found out that she was pregnant early on, but she had never thought it would cause her to deteriorate so rapidly. She looked just as worried as she had earlier that day. Nagia didn't answer straight away. She took a single napkin and began folding it. She's managing somehow, he said. Kataki sat down at the counter, leaving a seat between them. Nagir scratched the tip of his nose. Sorry to cause so much worry, he said, nodding apologetically as he looked over at her. You don't have to worry about that. But shouldn't she be in hospital? I told her she should, but she won't listen. Yes, but... He finished folding the paper crane and stared at it. I was against her having the baby, he muttered in a faint voice. If the cafe hadn't been so small and quiet, Kataki wouldn't have heard it. But nothing will change her mind, he said, looking at Kataki with a slight smile and then looking down. He had told Kai that he was against her having the baby, and that was as far as he would go. He couldn't say neither don't have it, nor I want you to have it. He couldn't choose between them, choosing Kai over the baby or choosing the baby over Kai. Kataki didn't know what to say. She looked up the ceiling fan that was rotating gently. That's tough, she agreed. Kazuo came out from the back room. Kazuo, Kataki whispered. Kazuo raised her gaze from Kataki and looked at Nagir. She wasn't her normal, unreadable self. She seemed sad and despondent. How is she? Nagir asked. Kazuo looked towards the back room. Nagir followed her eyes and saw Kai slowly approaching. Her complexion was still white and she walked a little unsteadily, but she seemed to be in much more control. She walked behind the counter and stood in front of Nagir looking at him, but he didn't look back. Instead, he simply stared at the paper cranes on the counter. As neither Nagir nor Kai spoke, the silence between them grew even more awkward by the minute. Kataki felt unable to move. Kazuo went into the kitchen and began to make coffee. She placed the filter in the funnel and poured hot water from the kettle into the flask. As everything was so quiet in the cafe, it was easy to tell what she was doing, even though she was outside. Soon the contents of the flask began to boil, and the gurgling sound of hot water ascending the funnel could be heard. After a few minutes, the aroma of fresh coffee filled the cafe. As if roused by the aroma, Nagir looked up. I'm sorry, Nagir, Kai mumbled. What for? Nagir asked, staring at the paper cranes. I'll go to the hospital tomorrow. I'll get admitted, Kai said, each word to herself as if trying to make peace with something she was still wrestling with. To be honest, once I go into hospital, I don't imagine I'll ever come home again. It's a decision I have been unable to make. I see. Nagir clenched his fist tightly. Kai lifted her chin and stared with her large round eyes into space. But it seems I can't go on like this any longer, she said, as her eyes filled with tears. Nagir listened quietly. There's only so much my body can take. Kai placed her hand on her stomach, which had yet to expand even an inch. Looks like giving birth to this child would take my all, she said with a knowing smile. It seemed that when it came to her body, she knew better than anyone. That's why? Nagir looked at her with his narrow eyes. Okay, was all he could reply. Kai, darling. This was the first time that Kataki had seen Kai upset like this. As a nurse, she understood the real danger that she faced in attempting to bear a baby with her heart condition. Her body had already. I'm so sorry, folks. I am fudging this up left, right, and centre. Her body had already become this frail while she was still just approaching the morning sickness phase. If she had chosen not to have a baby, no one would have blamed her, but she had decided to go ahead. But I am really scared, Kai muttered in a trembling voice. I wonder if my child will be happy. Will Mama's baby be lonely? Will that make you cry? She talked to her child as she always did. I might only be able to have you, my child. Will you forgive me? She listened, but no answer came. A stream of tears flowed down her cheek. I'm scared. The thought of not being there for my child is frightening, she said, looking directly at Nagir. I don't know what I should do. I want my child to be happy. How can such a simple wish be so terribly scary? She cried. Nagir gave no reply. He just gazed at the paper cranes on the counter. The woman in the dress closed her novel. She hadn't finished it. A white bookmark with a red ribbon tied to its left inserted between the pages. Hearing the book close, Kai looked over at her. The woman in the dress looked back at Kai and just went on staring at her. With her eyes fixed on Kai, the woman in the dress gently blinked just once. Then she smoothly got up from her seat. It was as if that blink had been meant to communicate something. Yet she had walked behind Nagir and Kataki and disappeared into the toilet as if she was being drawn inside. Her seat. That seat was vacant. Kai started walking towards the seat as if something was pulling her there. Then once in front of that seat, the one that consented to the past, she stood staring at it. Kazuo, could you make some coffee, please? She called weakly. Hearing Kai's request, Kazuo poked her head from the kitchen and saw her standing next to that seat. She had no idea what was on Kai's mind. Nagare turned round and saw Kai's back. "Oh, come on. You're not serious," he said. Kazuo spotted that the woman in the dress was gone and remembered the conversation from earlier that day. Fumiko Kayakawa had asked, "Could you visit the future too?" Fumiko's wish was simple. She wanted to know whether or not in 3 years Goro had returned from America and they were married. Kazuo had said that it could be done, but that no one decided to go because it was pointless. That was exactly what Kai wanted to do. "Just one look is all I want." "Hang on. If I could see for just a moment, that would be enough." "Do you seriously intend to go into the future?" Nagare asked, his tone gruffer than usual. "That's all I can do. But you don't know if you can meet." "What's the point of going there if you don't meet?" "I understand that. But..." Kai looked pleadingly into Nagare's eyes. But Nagare could only produce one word. "No," he said, turned his back on Kai and withdrew into silence. Nagare had never before stood in the way of Kai doing anything. He respected her insistent and determined personality. He didn't even argue strongly against her decision to put her life in the line to have a child. He objected to this. He wasn't just concerned with whether or not she would have her child. He thought if she went into the future and discovered that the child didn't exist, the inner strength that had been interested in her would be destroyed. Kai stood before the chair, weak but desperate. She couldn't walk away from her decision. She was not going to retreat from her position in front of that chair. I needed to decide how many years into the future, Kazuo said suddenly. She slid beside her and cleared away the cup that the woman in the dress had been drinking from. "How many years? What month, date, time?" she said as she asked Kai. She looked directly into Kai's eyes and gave a small nod. "Kazuo!" Nagare shouted with all the authority he could muster. But Kazuo ignored him and with her trademark cool expression said, "I will remember. I'll make sure you can meet. Kazuo, sweetheart." Kazuo was promising her that she would make sure her child would be there in the cafe at the time she chose to go into the future. "So you don't have to worry," she said. Kai gazed into her eyes and gave a little nod. Kazuo had the feeling that the deterioration in Kai's condition over the past few days wasn't down to the physical changes from her pregnancy alone, but that had also been caused by the overall stress of the situation. Kai wasn't afraid to die. Her anxiety and sadness stemmed from the thought of not being there to see her child grow up. This weighed heavily on her heart and was sapping her physical strength. As her strength faded, her sense of anxiety grew. Negativity is food for a malady, one might say. Kazuo feared that if Kai continued on this course, her condition would continue to weaken as the pregnancy progressed and the lives of both mother and child would be lost. A glimmer of positivity returned to Kai's eyes. "I can meet my child." It was a very, very small hope. Kai turned to look at Nagare sitting at the counter, her eyes locked with his. He was silent for a moment, but with a short sigh, he turned away. "Do as you wish," he said, turning on his stool so that his back was to her. "Thank you," she said to his back. After making sure that Kai was able to slide in between the table and the seat, Kazuo took the cup that the woman in the dress had used and disappeared into the kitchen. Kai inhaled deeply, slowly lowered herself into the seat, and closed her eyes. Kotake held her hands against in front of her as if in prayer, while Nagare stared silently at the paper cranes in front of him. This was the first time Kai had seen Kazuo defy Nagare's will. Outside the cafe, Kazuo rarely felt comfortable talking with anyone she hadn't met before. She went to Tokyo University of the Arts, but Kai had never seen her with anyone you might describe as a friend. She normally kept to herself. When not in university, she helped out at the cafe, and when that was finished, she retired to her room where she would work on her drawings. Kazuo's drawings were hyper-realistic. Using only pencils, she created works that appeared as true to life as actual photographs. But she could only draw things she could observe herself. Her drawings never depicted imagery or the invented. People don't see things and hear things as objectively as they might think. The visual and auditory information that enters the mind is distorted by experiences, thoughts and circumstances, wild fancies, preferences, knowledge, awareness and countless other workings of the mind. Pablo Picasso's sketch of a nude man that he did at age 8 is remarkable. The painting he did at age 14 of a Catholic communion ceremony is very realistic, but later, after the shot of his best friend's suicide, he created paintings in shades of blue that became known as the Blue Period. Then he met a new lover and created the bright and colourful works of the Rose period. Influenced by African sculptures, he became part of the Cubist movement. Then he turned to a neoclassical style, continued on to surrealism, and eventually painted the famous works The Weeping Woman and Guernica. Taken together, these artworks show the world as seen through Picasso's eyes. They are the result of something passing through the filter that is Picasso. Till now, Kazuo had never sought to challenge or influence people's opinions or behaviour. This was because her own feelings didn't form part of the filter through which she interacted with the world. Whatever happened, she tried not to influence it by keeping herself at a safe distance. That was Kazuo's place. It was her way of life. This was how she treated everyone. Her cool disposition when handling customers wishing to go back to the past was her way of saying, "Your reasons for going back to the past are none of my business." But this was different. She had made a promise. She was encouraging Kai to go to the future, and her actions were having a direct influence on Kai's future. It crossed Kai's mind that Kazuo must have her reasons for her out-of-character behaviour, but those reasons were not immediately apparent. "Sis," Kai opened her eyes to Kazuo's voice. Standing next to the table, Kazuo was holding a silver tray upon which was set a white coffee cup and a small silver kettle. "Are you okay?" "Yes, I'm fine." Kai corrected her posture and Kazuo quietly placed the cup in front of her. "How many years from now?" She prompted silently, with a small tilt of the head. Kai thought for a moment. "I want to make it 10 years, on 27th of August, she declared. When Kazuo heard the date, she gave out a smile. "Okay, then," she replied. 27th of August was Kai's birthday, a date that neither Kazuo nor Miguel would forget. "And the time?" 3 in the afternoon, Kai replied instantly. 10 years from now, on 27th of August at 3 in the afternoon. "Yes, please," Kai said, smiling. Kazuo gave a small nod and gripped the handle of the silver kettle. Right then, resumed her normal cool persona. Kai looked over at Miguel. "See you soon," she called, sounding clear-minded. He didn't look back. "Yeah, okay." During Kai and Miguel's exchange, Kazuo picked up the kettle and held it still above the coffee cup. "Drink the coffee before it goes cold," she whispered. The words sounded throughout the silent cafe. Kai could feel the tension in the room. Kazuo began pouring the coffee. A narrow black stream flowed from the small opening of the kettle spout, slowly filling the cup. Kai's gaze was fixed not on the cup, but on Kazuo. When the coffee had reached the top, Kazuo noticed her gaze and smiled warmly as if to say, "I will make sure you will meet." A shimmering plume of steam rose from the full cup of coffee. Kai felt her body shimmering as if it were steam. In a moment, she had become as light as a cloud, and everything around her had begun to flow as if she were in the middle of a film playing on fast forward. Normally, she would have reacted to this by gazing at the passing scenery with sparkling eyes of a child at an amusement park. But such was her mood right now, that her mind was closed even from appreciating such a weird experience. Nagir put his foot down in opposition, and Kazuo stepped up to give her a chance. Now she was waiting to meet her child, surrendering to this shimmering dizziness. She brought to mind her own childhood. Kai's father, Mikinori Matsuzawa, also had a weak heart. He collapsed at work when Kai was in grade 3 elementary school. After that, he was frequently in and out of hospital until he departed just 1 year later. Kai was 9 years old, a naturally sociable child who was always happy and smiling. And yet at the same time, she was sensitive and highly strung. Her father's death left her a dark place emotionally. She encountered death for the first time and referred to it as the very dark box. Once you climbed inside that box, you never got out. Her father was trapped in there, a place where he encountered no one, awful and lonely. When she thought of her father, her nights were robbed of sleep. Gradually, her smile faded. Her mother Tamako's reaction to her husband's death was the opposite of Kai's. She spent her days with a permanent smile. She had never really had a bright disposition. She and Mikaneri seemed an unexciting, ordinary married couple. Tamako had cried at the funeral, but after that day, she never showed a miserable face. She smiled far more than she had done before. Kai couldn't understand at all why her mother was always smiling. She asked her, "Why are you so happy when Dad is dead? Aren't you sad?" Tamako, who knew that Kai described death as a very dark box, answered, "Well, if your father could see us from that very dark box, what do you suppose he would be thinking?" With nothing but the kindest of thoughts for Kai's father, Tamako was trying her best to answer the accusatory question that Kai was asking. "Why are you so happy?" "Your father didn't go in that box because he wanted to. There was a reason. He had to go. If your father could see from his box and see you crying every day, what do you think he would think? I think it would make him sad. You know how much your father loved you. Don't you think it would be painful for him to see the unhappy face of someone he loved? So why don't you smile every day so that your father can smile from his box? Our smiles allow him to smile. Our happiness allows your father to be happy in his box. On hearing this explanation, Kai's eyes welled up with tears. Hugging Kai tightly, Tamako's eyes glistened with the tears that she'd kept hidden since the funeral. Next, it was my turn to go into the box. Kai understood for the first time how hard it must have been for her father. Her heart tightened at the thought of how devastated she must have been, knowing that his time was up and that he had to leave his family. But by finally taking into account her father's feelings, she also understood more fully the greatness of her mother's words. She realised that only a deep love and understanding of her husband would have allowed her mother to say those things. After a while, everything around her gradually slowed and settled. She transformed from steam back into the bodily form, changing shape back into Kai. I beg your pardon. Thanks to Guustavv, she had arrived. 10 years in the future. The first thing she did was to look around the room carefully. The thick wall pillars and the wooden beam crossing the ceiling were a lustrous dark brown, the colour of chestnuts. On the walls there were 3 large clocks. The tan walls made of earth and plaster and a patina left by more than 100 years. She thought it was wonderful. The dim lighting that coloured the entire cafe with a sepia hue, even during the day, gave no sense of time. The retro atmosphere of the cafe had a comforting effect. Above there was a wooden ceiling fan, rotating slowly without a sound. There was nothing to tell her that she arrived 10 years into the future. However, the tier of calendar next to the cash register showed that it was indeed 27th of August, and Guustavv, Nagira and Kataki had been at the cafe with her until moments ago were nowhere to be seen. In their place, a man stood behind the counter, staring at her. She was confused to see him. He was wearing a white shirt, black waistcoat and bow tie, and he had a standard short back and sides hairstyle. It was clear that he worked in the cafe. He was standing behind the counter for one thing, and he didn't appear surprised that Kai had just suddenly appeared in the chair. So he must have known about the special nature of the seat she was sitting in. He did not say anything, just kept staring at Kai. To not engage with the person who appeared was precisely how a staff member would behave. After a while, the man began squeakily polishing the glass he was holding. He looked as if he was in his late 30s, maybe early 40s. He just looked like a standard issue waiter. He didn't have the friendliest of manners, and there was a large burn scar running from above his right eyebrow to his right ear, which gave him a rather intimidating air. Excuse me. Normally Kai wasn't the type to worry about whether a person was approachable or not. She could begin a conversation with anyone and address them as if they'd been friends for years. But at that moment she was feeling a little confused by everything. She spoke to the man as if she was a foreigner struggling with a second language. Where's the manager? The manager? The cafe manager. Is he here? The man behind the counter returned the polished glass to the shelf. That would be me, I guess, he replied. What? I'm sorry, what is it? You are. You're the manager. Yes. Of here? Yes. Of this cafe? Yes. Really? Yep. That can't be right. Kai leaned back in surprise. The man behind the counter was startled by her response. He stopped what he was doing and came out from behind the counter. What's wrong exactly? He said, clearly rattled. Perhaps the first time someone had reacted in such a way. Perhaps it was the first time someone had reacted in such a way to learn he was the manager. But Kai's expression seemed over the top. Kai was trying hard to make sense of the situation. What had happened during those 10 years? She couldn't work out how this could be. She had so many questions for the man in front of her, but her thoughts were a jumble and time was of the essence. The coffee would go cold and her decision to come to future would have been in vain. She collected herself. She looked up at the man who was peering at her with concern. I must calm myself. Yes? What about the previous manager? Previous manager? You know, really big guy, narrow eyes. Oh, Nagira! Right! The man at least knew Nagira. Kai found herself leaning forward. Nagira isn't Hokkaido right now. Hokkaido? Yes. She blinked in amazement. She needed to hear it a second time. Huh, Hokkaido? Yes. She began to feel dizzy. It wasn't going as she had planned. Since she had known Nagira, never once had he mentioned anything about Hokkaido. But why? Well, that I can't answer. The the man said as he rubbed the skin above his right eyebrow. She felt utterly rattled. Nothing was making sense. Oh, was it your plan to meet Nagia? Unaware of Kai's mission, the man had guessed wrongly, but she had lost the will to answer. It was all futile. She was never very good at thinking about things rationally. She always based her decisions in life guided by intuition. So when faced with a situation like this, she was at a loss to understand what was going on, or how it could have happened. She had thought that if she could go to the future, she could meet her child. As her mood began to sink, the man asked, "Then you came to meet Kazu?" "Aha!" Kai shouted, suddenly seeing new hope. How could she have forgotten? She had focused on asking the man about the manager, but she had forgotten something important. It was Kazu who had encouraged her to go to the future. It was she who had made the promise. It didn't matter if Nagia was in Hokkaido. As long as Kazu was here, there was no problem. Kai tried to contain her surging excitement. "What about Kazu?" she quickly asked. "What? Kazu? Is Kazu here?" If the man had been standing any closer, Kai probably would have grabbed him by his shirt front. Her intensity compelled him to make a couple of steps back. "Is she here or not?" Look," the man averted his gaze, overwhelmed by Kai's quick-fire questioning. "The truth is, Kazu is in Hokkaido as well," the man replied carefully. "That's it then." The man's reply had completely dashed her hopes. "Oh no, not even Kazu is here." He looked with concern at Kai. She looked as if her spirit had been totally sapped from her. "Are you alright?" he asked. Kai looked up at the man with a look that said, "Isn't it perfectly obvious?" But she had no idea about her situation, and so there was nothing she could say. "Yeah, I'm fine," she said dejectedly. The man tilted his head in confusion and walked back behind the counter. Kai began rubbing her stomach. "I don't know why, but if those two are Hokkaido, this child must be with them there too. It doesn't look like it's going to happen." She dropped her shoulders, slumping despondently. It was always going to be a gamble. If luck was on her side, they would meet. Kai had known that. Meeting people in the future was so easy that more people would be trying it. For example, if Amiko Kaiokawa and Goro had promised to meet at the cafe to eat in 3 years' time, then of course it was possible they would meet. But for this to happen, Goro would have to keep his promise to come. There are many reasons for being unable to keep such a promise. You could try to drive but get stuck in traffic. You could decide to walk but get diverted by roadworks. You might get stopped, ask for directions, or lose his way. There might even be a sudden torrential downpour or a natural disaster. You might sleep in or simply mix up the time they were due to meet. In other words, the future is uncertain. With this in mind, for whatever the reason for Nagia and Kazu being in Hokkaido, you fell within the range of things that can happen. Hokkaido was 1,000 kilometres away, and it was a shock to hear that it had gone so far. But even if it's only been one train stop away, you'll still have to be able to get back to the cafe before the coffee went cold. Suppose when she returns to the present, she conveys this turn of events. It would not change the fact that they were in Hokkaido. Kai knew the rule. Her luck had run out. It was as simple as that. After thinking things over, she began to feel more collected. She picked up the cup and took a sip. The coffee was still pretty warm. She could switch moods quickly. Another one of her talents for living happily. Her ups and downs could be extreme, but they never lingered. It was assumed that she couldn't meet her child, but she had no regrets. She had followed her wishes and managed to travel to the future. She wasn't cross with Kazu or Nagia either. They surely had a good reason. It's inconceivable that they wouldn't have done their best to be there to meet her. For me, the promise was made just a few minutes ago. Here, it was 10 years later. Oh well, it can't be helped. When I go back, it may as well say that we met. Kai reached out for the sugar pot sitting on the table. Just as she was planning to add sugar to her coffee, the bell rang, and out of habit she was about to yell, "Hello, welcome," when the man said it before her. Kai bit her lip and looked over to the entrance. "Oh, it's you," the man called. "Hi, I'm back," said the girl, who looked like she may have been in junior high school, 14 or 15 years old. She was wearing summer clothes, a sleeveless white shirt with cropped denim trousers and cord sandals. Her hair was neatly done up in a ponytail fastened with a red haircut. "Oh, the girl from the other day." Kai recognised her as soon as she saw her face. It was the girl who had come from the future and asked to have their photo taken together. She was wearing winter clothes at the time and had her hair cut short, so she looked a little different, but Kai remembered how she had been struck by those big sweet eyes. "So this is where we meet?" Kai nodded in understanding and folded her arms. On that occasion, she had thought it weird to have a visitor she didn't recognise, but now it made sense. "We had a photo taken together, didn't we?" she said to the girl. The girl's face showed a puzzled expression. "I'm sorry, what are you talking about?" she asked tentatively. Kai realised her error. Oh, I see. The girl must have come after this meeting. Her question obviously wouldn't make any sense in that case. Oh, forget I said that. It's nothing, she said, smiling to the girl. The girl seemed unnerved. She gave a polite little nod and disappeared into the back room. Well, that makes me feel better. Kai felt much happier now. She had come to the future on to find Kazu and Nagir had gone, and in their place a man she didn't recognise. She had begun to feel depressed at the prospect of turning home with nothing having travelled out as she'd imagined. Nothing having turned out as she'd imagined. But that all changed when the girl appeared. She touched her cup to check that it was still warm. We must become friends before this coffee cools. Thinking this, a hardening feeling of elation filled her chest, and it counted between people 10 years apart. The girl came back into the cafe. Oh, she was holding a wine-red apron. That's the apron I used! Kai hadn't forgotten her original aim, but she wasn't the type to stew over things that weren't going to happen. She altered her plans. She would befriend this interesting girl. The man peered out from the kitchen and glanced at the girl with the apron. Oh, you don't have to help out today. After all, it's just that one customer. But the girl gave no reply and stood behind the counter. The man didn't seem intent on pressing the issue and withdrew into the kitchen. The girl began to wipe the counter. Hey, look this way! Kai was desperately trying to attract the girl's attention by rocking her body left and right. The girl didn't look at her once. This did not douse Kai's enthusiasm. If she is helping here, perhaps that means she's the manager's daughter. Kai considered such possibilities. The disruptive sound of a phone ring could be heard from the back room. Kai suddenly thought they heard Wild response to answer the phone. What may have been 10 years later, but the sound of a phone was unchanged. Oh, be careful. That was close. She almost broke the rule and left the seat. She was able to leave the seat, but if so, she would have forcibly returned to the present. The man came out from the kitchen calling, I've got it, and went into the back room to answer the phone. Kai made an exaggerated gesture of wiping her brow and gave a sigh of relief. She heard the man talking. Yes, hello? Oh, hi. Yes, she is. Oh, right, okay, hang on, I'll get her. The man suddenly came out from the back room. The man brought the phone to Kai. Phone, she said as he handed Kai the handset. For me? It's Nagir. On hearing Nagir's name, she promptly took the phone. Hello? Why are you in Hokkaido? Can you explain to me what's going on? She said in a voice loud enough to resound throughout the cafe. The man, still not grasping the situation, tilted his head in confusion and turned to the kitchen. The girl showed no response, as if she was oblivious to Kai's loud voice. She simply continued doing what she was doing. What's that? There's no time? I'm the one with no time. Even though she was talking, the coffee was cooling. I can hardly hear you. What? She was holding the handset to her left ear while plucking her right ear with her other hand. For some reason, there was a terrible racket in the background on the other end of the line, which made it difficult to hear anything. What? Schoolgirl? She continued to Nagir to repeat what he was saying. Yeah, she's here. The one who visited the cafe about 2 weeks ago. She came from the future to get a photo with me. Yes? What about her? She asked, looking at the girl who, while averting her gaze, had stopped what she was doing. Wonder why she looked so nervous, Kai thought as the conversation continued. It was bothering her, but she had to focus on listening to the important information that Gare was giving her. Like I told you, I can hardly hear you. What you're saying, eh? What? That girl? Our daughter. Just that moment in the middle wall, the clock began to chime. 10 times. It was then that Kai had first realised what the time was. The time she arrived in the future was not 3 in the afternoon. It was 10 in the morning. The smile fell from her face. Oh. Okay, right, she replied in a weak voice. She hung up and placed the handset on the table. She had been looking forward to speaking to the girl, but now her expression was pale and drawn. Without any remnants of that bright, expectant look that existed just moments before, the girl had stopped what she was doing and also looked completely spooked. Kai slowly reached out and held the cup to check the temperature of the coffee. It was still warm. There was time left before it was completely cold. She turned and looked at the girl again. My child. The realisation that she was now face to face with her child hit her suddenly. The static had made the phone call difficult to hear, but she had got the gist of it. You planned to travel 10 years into the future, but there was some kind of mistake and you travelled 15 years. It seems 10 years, 1500, and 15 years, 1000 were mixed up. We heard about it when you returned from the future, but right now we're in Hokkaido for unavoidable reasons that I won't go into because there's no time. The girl you see before you is our daughter. You don't have much time left, so just have a good look at our all grown up, fit and well daughter. After having said all that, the girl must have been worried about the time Kai had left, and he simply hung up on her. Kai learned that the girl in front of her was her daughter. Kai suddenly had no idea how to talk to her. More than confusion and panic, she felt a strong sense of regret. What she regretted was pretty simple. She was no doubt that the girl knew she was her mother. That Kai had assumed the girl was someone else's daughter. The age difference had been too big. Although she didn't pay any attention to it until now, Kai suddenly heard the sound of the ticking hands on the wall clocks. He seemed to be saying, tick tock, tick tock. Coffee is going cold. There was indeed no time. But Kai saw the girl's sullen expression answer to the question she wanted to ask but hadn't managed to. Can you forgive me? All that I could do was bring you into this world. It cast a shadow over her heart. She struggled to think to say, "What's your name?" she asked. Without responding to the simple question, the girl bowed her head in silence. Kai interrupted as further proof that she blamed her. Unable to bear the silence, she also bowed her head. Then, Mickey. The girl offered her name in a small, sad and weak-sounding voice. Kai wanted to ask so much, but for hearing how faint Mickey's voice was, she got the impression that she was reluctant to speak to her. Mickey! Oh, that's nice! Was all she managed to respond. Mickey said nothing, instead looked at Kai as if she didn't like her reaction and rushed towards the back room. At that moment, the man poked his head out from the kitchen. Mickey, are you okay? He called, but Mickey ignored him and vanished into the back room. Hello, welcome! A woman entered the cafe just as the man offered his greeting. She was wearing a short-sleeved white blouse, black trousers and a wine-red apron. She must have been running in the hot sun as she was out of breath and sweating profusely. Ah! Kai recognised her, or at least she was still recognisable. Looking at the panting woman, Kai got a real sense of that 15 years had passed. It was Fumiko Kayokawa, the woman who just earlier that day had asked Kai if she was okay. Fumiko had a slim build then, but now she was quite round. Beg your pardon. Fumiko noticed that Mickey wasn't there. Where is Mickey? She asked the man. She must have known that Kai was going to come at this time today. She had that sense of urgency. The man was obviously flustered by her tone. In the back, he answered, still to understand what was going on. Why? She asked as she slapped her hand on the counter. What? He said unapologetically. He started rubbing the scar above his right eyebrow, confused as to why he was being blamed. I don't believe this, she sighed, glaring at the man. But she didn't want to waste time on accusations. She was already at fault for being late for such an important event. So you're looking after the cafe? Kai asked in a weak voice. Yeah, Fumiko answered directly at her. Did you talk to Mickey? It was a straightforward enough question that Kai felt uncomfortable answering. She just looked down. Did you have a proper talk? Fumiko pressed. Oh, I don't know, Kai mumbled. I'll go and call her. No, it's okay, Kai said more clearly, halting Fumiko, who was already making her way to the back room. Why'd you say that? It's enough, Kai said with a struggle. We saw each other's faces. Oh, come on. She didn't seem like she wanted to meet. Oh, she does so, Fumiko said, contradicting Kai. Mickey had always really wanted to meet you. She has been looking forward to this day for so long. I just think it must have caused her so much sadness. Of course there have been times when she's been down. I thought as much. Kai reached out for the coffee cup. Fumiko saw her doing it. So you're just going to go back and leave things as they are? She said, realising she was failing to convince her to stay. Could you just tell her that I said I'm sorry? At Kai's words, Fumiko's expression turned suddenly grim. But I don't think you mean that. Do you regret giving birth to Mickey? Can't you see that saying sorry can only mean it was your mistake to have her? I haven't given birth to her yet. I haven't. I have no second thoughts about my decision to do so. On seeing Kai clearly shake her head in response, Fumiko said, let me call Mickey. Kai couldn't reply. I'll go and get her. Fumiko didn't wait for Kai to reply. She simply disappeared into the back room, well aware that time was of the essence. Hey, Fumiko, said the man, as he followed her into the back room. Oh, what am I to do? Left alone in the cafe, Kai stared at the coffee in front of her. Fumiko was right. That just seems to make it more difficult to know what to say. Then Mickey appeared, Fumiko held her hands on her shoulders. Rather than Kai, Mickey's eyes were directed to the floor. Come on, sweetie, don't waste this moment, Fumiko said. Mickey. Kai meant to speak her name out loud, but no voice came. Okay then, Fumiko said, lifting her hands from Mickey's shoulders. She looked quickly at Kai and then retreated to the back room. Even after Fumiko had gone, Mickey continued to look down at the floor in silence. I'm going to have to say something. Kai removed her hand from the cup and took a breath. So, are you well? Mickey lifted her head a little and looked at Kai. Yes, she said, in a quiet, tentative voice. You help out here? Yeah. Mickey's answers were blunt and monosyllabic. Kai was finding it difficult to continue talking. Both Daguerre and Kazu are in Hokkaido? Yeah. Mickey continued to avoid looking at Kai's face. Each time she answered, she spoke a little more softly. It didn't seem to be much she wanted to talk about. Without giving it much thought, Kai asked, Why did you stay here? Kai regretted asking the question the moment it left her lips. When she realised that she had hoped to hear Mickey say that it was so she could meet her, she knew how sensitive such a forthright question must have sounded. So she looked down in embarrassment. But then Mickey spoke. Well, you see, she began her soft voice, I make the coffee for the people in that seat. Make the coffee? Yeah, like Kazu always did. Oh, it's my job now. Really? Yeah. But there the flow of conversation abruptly ended. Mickey didn't seem to know what else to say and turned her gaze downwards. Kai was unable to find any words to say next, but there was one thing she wanted to ask. Bringing you into this world was the only thing that I did for you. Can you forgive me for that? But how can she expect to receive such forgiveness? She had caused Mickey so much sadness. Mickey's reaction made Kai feel like she had been selfish to come. Finding it increasingly difficult to look at her, Kai looked down at the coffee before her. The surface of the coffee was filling up ever so slightly trembling. The surface of the coffee filling the cup was ever so slightly trembling. There was no longer any rising steam. Judging by the temperature of the cup, it was soon time for her to leave. What was it I came here to do? Was there any point in my coming from the future? It all seems so pointless now. The only thing that has come from is more suffering from Mickey. When I return to the past, no matter how I tried, it won't change Mickey's unhappiness. That cannot be changed. Take Katake, for instance. She returned to the past, but it didn't cure for Sagi. And likewise, Harai wasn't able to stop her sister from dying. Katake got to receive her letter while Harai met her sister. Usagi's illness is still worsening, and Harai will never see her sister again. It's the same for me as well. There's nothing I can do that will change the 15 years that Mickey has spent in sadness. Although she had been granted her wish of visiting the future, she still felt utter despair. Well, I can't let the coffee go cold, Kai said as she reached out and took the coffee cup. Time to go back. But at that moment she had footsteps approaching. Mickey had walked right up to her. She put the cup back on the table and looked directly at her daughter. Mickey. Kai didn't know what Mickey was thinking, but she couldn't take her eyes away from her face. Mickey was standing so close she could touch her. Mickey took a deep breath. Just before, she said with a trembling voice, when you said to Fumiko that I didn't want to meet, it's not like that. Kai listened, hanging on to every word. I always thought if we met, I would want to talk to you. There are so many things that Kai wanted to ask also. But when it actually happened, I didn't know what to say. Kai hadn't known what to say either. She dreaded how Mickey might be feeling. She failed to put the things she wanted to ask into words. And yes, there have been times when I have been sad. Kai could well imagine. The thought of Mickey alone like that was heart-wrenching for her. I cannot change those sad times of feelings. But, Mickey smiled bashfully as she took a little step closer. I'm really glad for the life you gave me. It takes courage to say what has to be said. No doubt it took Mickey all of her courage to express her feelings to the mother she had just met. Her voice wavered with uncertainty as it conveyed her true feelings. But large teardrops began flowing from Kai's eyes. Giving birth to you is the only thing I will ever be able to do for you. Mickey also began crying, using both hands to wipe away the tears. She smiled sweetly. Mum. She said in a nervousness, excited voice, but Kai heard it clearly. Mickey was calling her Mum. I haven't given you anything. Kai covered her face with both hands. Her shoulders shuddered as she wept. Mum. Hearing her name called again, Kai suddenly remembered that soon must be time to say goodbye. What? Kai lifted up her face and smiled, reciprocating Mickey's feelings. Thank you, Mickey said with the broadest of smiles. Thank you for having me. Thank you. She looked at Kai and quickly held up a peace sign. Mickey. Mum. At that moment, Kai's heart sang with happiness. She was the mother of this child. She wasn't just a parent. She was the mother of the girl standing before her. She was unable to stop the tears from gushing. I finally understand. The present didn't change for Kataki, but she banned anyone from using her maiden name and changing her attitude towards Usagi. She would be with Usagi to continue being his wife, even though she had vanished from his memories. Harai abandoned her successful bar to rejoin her family. While repairing her relationship with her parents, she was learning the traditional ways of the inn from square one. The present doesn't change. Nothing about Usagi changed, but Kataki came to enjoy her conversations with him. Harai has still lost her sister, but the photo she sent to the cafe showed her looking happy with her parents. The present hadn't changed, but those two people had. Both Kataki and Harai returned to the past with a changed heart. Kai gently closed her eyes. I was so absorbed in things that I couldn't change. I forgot the most important thing. Filling in for her, Fumiko had been by Mickey's side for these 15 years. He had been there for Mickey as her father, showering her with love, no doubt giving some way to make up for her absence. Also filling in for her, Kazu had lavished Mickey with kindness, playing the role of mother and big sister. She realised that there had been all those loving people around Mickey, endlessly supported her growth for the 15 years she had been gone, wishing for her happiness. Thank you for growing up so happily and healthily. Just by growing up so fit and well, you have made me so happy. Give me a minute. This book is very emotional. Give me a minute. That's all I want to say to you. That's how I feel deep down. Mickey, leaving her flowing tears unwiped, Guy gave her best smile to Mickey. Thank you for the honour of having you. Upon Kai's return from the future, her face was a tearful mess. It was immediately plain to everyone that these were not tears of sadness. Nagira sighed in relief and Kataki burst into tears. Mikazu smiled with such kind. Oh, shut up, Emma. I'm so sorry, folks. I know this is the last part of the series. Give me a second, right? I'm good, so good. The girl smiled in relief and Kataki burst into tears, but Kazu smiled with such kindness. It was as if she had seen what had happened for herself. Welcome home, she said. The next day, Kai checked into hospital. In spring the next year, a healthy, happy baby girl came into the world. The magazine piece of the urban legend has stated, at the end of the day, when the one returns to the past or travels to the future, the present does not change. So it raises the question, just what is the point of that chair? But Kazu still goes on believing that no matter what difficulties people face, they'll always have the strength to overcome them. It just takes heart. And if the chair can change someone's heart, it clearly has its purpose. But with her cool expression, she would just say, drink the coffee before it gets cold. And we're finished. Cover to cover emotion. What did we all think of this one? I actually really enjoyed this book, but I do have to return it. This does not belong to me. Like, wow. So, let's break it down a bit. You can return to the past. You can meet with whoever you need to meet in the cafe in the past. It does not change the present. You return to the future. So you travel to the future, but it doesn't change the present. What does change is your actions. If you return to the past, the present doesn't change, but the future from that point in time at the present can change differently. In the first story, Fumiko went back to the past to meet Goro. If we remember, that was the lovers, that was part 1. Fumiko went back to the past to meet Goro because with their initial coffee meeting in the cafe, he left without saying anything because he was getting so annoyed with Fumiko's attitude because he was leaving for America. When she went back to the past, she had a change of heart and he said 3 years wait for me for 3 years. So therefore, because she had that change of heart, he did also. And now she will see him again 3 years from that point. When Kotake went back to get the letter from Fusagi, she realised exactly what was to happen. She no longer wants to be called Kotake, which was her maiden name. She is back to being Mrs. Fusagi. But she insists on being his wife through his Alzheimer's. That's dedication, that's commitment and devotion. She may also be his nurse, but first and foremost, she is his wife. That's love. And then we have the sisters. Harai lost her sister the last time she visited the cafe. And even though when she went back to the day she was there, like 2 or 3 days before, even though she went back to fight to actually meet her, not avoid her, she couldn't change the fact that she passed away. But she could do something that she always wanted to do, and that was run the cafe, run the inn. But instead of with her sister, it was in honour of her sister. She was continuing her sister's legacy. Harai had a change of heart of going back home, where she hadn't been for so many years. She had a change of heart because she promised her sister. And then we have Kai. Darling, sweet Kai. The heart condition is deteriorating so much as her pregnancy goes on. Heart-wrenching decisions she's had to make. And she's happy she made the right one, was to have her baby and sacrifice herself. That's motherhood. Even if you're not there for your child growing up, that's motherhood. And she's happy she met her daughter Mickey. Her daughter's healthy. Her daughter is thankful. Her daughter has a kind heart. It's a very emotional book. It's beautiful though. It can seem a little bit far-fetched, but I think the point of the stories is you cannot change what has happened to suit yourself, but you can change it for the better in the years to come. You have to have that attitude, that change of heart, the mental clarity you need to change what needs to be changed. You can't do it by visiting the past to change the present. What you actually have to do is have a change of heart. And it's determination. It's the one way I can think of it is, let's say you have a goal in life, okay? It's not going to come to you. You've got to go to that goal. You have to work your bahuki off. You have to have a change of heart. You have to assess things right. So it's not going to come to me. What can I do to achieve that goal? You could put it in an analogy like that. So the time travelling does seem a little bit far-fetched, okay? Who am I to argue? I'm a Doctor Who fan. I'm a Class A Whovian. I have watched all of them, right down to William Hartnell, the very first one. I've seen them all. But that's science fiction. In real life, it does seem a bit far-fetched. The moral of this story, I personally believe, is if you want something so much, you have to go and get it. You have to not sit down and wait for it to come to you, because it's never going to happen. You have to get up, you have to work, you have to have that determination, the motivation, and the heart. You need to have the heart. Yeah. I think breaking it down like that can give someone a lot of clarity. And I have been doing this book for 4 weeks now. And I really hope you enjoyed all the stories. And I must apologise for my really bad Japanese pronunciation. My wobbly voice with the emotional parts. I must apologise throughout those 4 weeks. Not to mention my really bad storytelling and the fact that I cannot read out loud, it's a work in progress, that one. But I would love to thank you all very much for joining me in this book. Next week we start a new book called The Girl in the Mirror by Rose Carlyle. I'll see you all then. Thank you so much for watching. Catch you back.